We both do.
I live downtown, so you know.
I live near Old.
Yeah.
Oh,
we're live, by the way. I just got a prompt saying that, oh, by the way, Hangouts on Air is being discontinued on August 1st. That's why it's not being supported. So in the future, we'll have to figure out how to do this. But in the meantime, we still have this technology. So welcome back, everyone. It's our 18th Hangout. It's in July. And at least over here in this part of Victoria, it's finally brightening up. Today was miserable.
It poured all morning.
Yeah, so I actually took a mental health day today. I didn't go to work. I only had like 3 hours of work, but like I was lying in bed and I was like, I really, really don't want to teach right now. So I just called out my students. I was like, I'm so sorry, I need a break. And then the rain stopped, and I was like, oh, that's nature. Like that's like the universe telling me that I needed this day off. But yeah, but it was great. I mean, we were just talking about Amanda has a new book from Try Guys, right? And I was just thinking how like if I were to go into work right now, I would actually be failing at teaching because I wouldn't want to be there. And because my students,
you didn't realize that you needed that break.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to go in, and I still wanted to do this, so we're going to do this. So it was my choice, and for those of you who actually picked this up, I'm sorry. There were so many things in here that, okay, so caveat, someone had told me that we could actually read this separate from the Discworld series and you would still get most of the information. So there's a huge part of the storyline in this book where if you don't know the Discworld and you don't know the places and you don't know the people, you have no idea what's going on. So I skimmed a lot of that stuff because I was like, I don't have time to look this up. But for those of you who have read a lot of the Discworld books, this would be like a continuation of a lot of the stories, at least the continuation of like the lands and the places that you guys know and some of the characters that you guys know.
Yeah. That being said, I have a couple reviewers that are Discworld viewers. I don't have viewers, sorry. I have reviewers that I follow, and they are Discworld aficionados, and they rated this book quite low.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's probably not the best of the Discworld oeuvre.
Yeah.
I read that too when I was on Goodreads. When I was in like the last 50 pages, I kind of popped on there. Like the ratings either from what I saw were really high, like 4 or 5, or they were at like 1 or 2. Like there was nothing really in the middle.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you either liked it or you didn't like it.
Yeah, and like, I mean, we can start with just talking, I guess, like overall feelings of the book. I mean, I chose this. It's been sitting on my shelf for a while, but also I have to say, I mean, I don't know how I feel about it.
I'm kind of
yeah, because I read Good Omens a couple of months ago, and that was a recommendation, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm not into this type of humor. like very British, right? Type of humor.
Absurd and dry.
Yeah, and this one was full of that, and I was like, right, they're the same writers, right?
Very referential.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so like what Karen has said before, this book doesn't suck. It just wasn't written for me. And there were actually a couple of quotes that I really liked from this book. I essentially just focused on the band. That's what I pretty much did. And I kind of just skimmed through the death like storyline and then the academy storyline, the university storyline. So I kind of didn't, like, I read it when it was pertaining to the band and they were kind of getting involved with the band. But when it kind of, like, they kind of diverged, I was just like, okay, band. Okay, I'm going to read that now.
Yeah.
So.
Because I feel that the band, they were just created for this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas Death was a carryover and all of the university people is also a carryover. So there's new characters and you focused on those.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I haven't read Discworld, so I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of ironically was more interested in Susan and the
yeah.
I was more interested in Susan
yes.
and like the actually the rat death, which
yeah, the death of rats.
Rat death coming back. I was kind of more invested in kind of her inner storyline, and I kind of felt that by the time that the band kind of got famous or whatever, I was kind of bored with them.
Yeah. So I
I'm a weird
also
disorder.
multiple times wrote in my journal, needs more Death and Susan.
Yes, actually. Yeah.
I wrote multiple times. I'm like, where's Susan? I want Susan.
Where did she go? Why isn't she dead yet?
Well, and like that's why I didn't focus on Susan. Carrie and I actually had a conversation offline, and she was like, "I'm really into Susan." I was like, "All right, I will focus on the music because that's why we were reading this book in the first place."
Yeah.
I do totally agree. If you were to like, it felt like at the very beginning, the whole band coming together, it was very disjointed, right? It was kind of like, oh, this just happened, and it's kind of like even like I don't know, like even the author itself was just like, let's just fit this in here, and then it slowly kind of like they got melded together afterwards.
Yeah.
But it was very distinctly different storylines that had nothing to do with each other, and the only reason why it they melded together was because Susan had this memory of I think his name is Buddy, but I think his name was like Lias or something.
Lias was the other guy.
No, it was
Oh, no.
Kip.
yeah, Sip or Kip or something.
Okay, so this is part of the problem that I found with the band was that they had the name change.
Yeah.
Through, and so you had gotten attached to their characters right at the beginning, and then they switched their names, and it was like, who is this person? I don't.
Yeah, I kind of went like 5 to 10 pages. I'm like, who's this Buddy character?
But they were supposed to be jokes, right?
Yeah.
Buddy was supposed to be Buddy Holly.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like, okay.
Yeah.
And the other band who was like Scum, and then there was
Crash,
and then Crash, and then there was something else. I'm like, I can't do this. I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's why I mentioned like I felt like it was very disjointed because I was like, okay, I want like there's this. I love the whole guild thing. That was really cool. I was like, all right, like the whole drama with the guild thing. All right, let's do this. There's this band who wants to just do their own thing. This is amazing. But then they didn't really talk much about the guild. It was only the guild getting in the way. And trying to like kind of like sabotage their stuff, and they didn't even do a good job at sabotaging because they were a poor guild.
Yeah, it sort of reminded me of how people have to buy a license to busk. It kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Like, but we can't buy because we don't have money. They're like, well, you can't busk if you can't pay your fees. And it's like, but we don't have money to pay the fees. That was very real.
Yeah.
And the money grubbing manager was also quite real.
Yep.
Although out of all the stuff that happened with the band, the one thing I wish they talked more about was that music store that had all those little instruments. Because it was like, oh, don't touch that flute because if you do, we're gonna be infested with rats. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, talk more about the store. I want to know about the store and how they got all this stuff and where this.
Follow the store. Let's just follow.
I didn't know where the store came from because she's talking about all this stuff, and then she pulled out this. The instruments all have a number.
Yeah.
And the guitar was 1. I'm like, why is it 1? Give me something.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea was that because like there's that one scene where like everyone like dies in that fiery death, right? And then they're all like suspended, and then like the instruments like, let me tell you who I am, right? And then they witness the birthing of the universe, right? So like I think the whole point was that the guitar, I guess, made the universe. It's like, it's not magic, it's music, and music is immune to magic, right? So I don't know. Like I said, like I thought it was disjointed. There were some really cool concepts, but I just didn't want to follow them after a while. You're right. Like once the band got big, and I was like, are we like following Guns N' Roses? This is so boring. Well, because it was like, I was like, okay, so this is Discworld. It's supposed to be a fantastical place. Why am I listening to like human normal stuff? I don't want to deal with normal human stuff. Like I want like, I mean, this guitar is enchanted and it has the magic to essentially take people over, and you don't play the guitar, it plays you, right? So at one point they were like, they didn't realize what was going on, and then they finished playing that second gig in the cavern with like all the trolls, right? And Glaude was like, I had no idea what I just did for 2 hours, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I want to know more about this, but they didn't really talk much about that. They didn't dive much into that, and then I kept on reading, and it was like, oh, it's over. Like, and then like it's like somewhere else in like the universe, someone picks up an instrument. it never dies, it continues living on. I was like,
It would be, yeah, it would be interesting to know if Terry Pratchett has knowledge of music. Because to me, it was almost like our very first book, Bel Canto, where it was like, it sort of just touched on the surface. And you wanted it to go just like a little bit more. So like the idea of music overtaking you. Have you ever had those performances where you blink and it's over and you're like, did I just do that? Did I just play? You want to delve more into that concept. But
every bad recital at UVic.
yeah, basically. You're nervous, and then suddenly okay.
Yeah.
Like that, and the whole idea of, I don't know if I've just like skimmed over this, the box with the wire in the side that gets inside that was talked about, and then I'm like,
See, like that's why I was like, that's my biggest issue with this book was that they're like, I mean, obviously they were trying to create a music box, right, or like a recording device of some sort. So I was like, oh, that's really cool, but like that's too like now, like reality. Like I want like a stone, a power stone, you know? I want like, maybe you can trap a ghost, like you can trap like the music in like a bottle, kind of like a genie of some sort. Like I think a lot of the and like I don't know anything about the disc world, so I don't know if that's the whole like, oh hey, this is like this fantastical world, but humans live in it. So like basic human stuff happens. So like that's why for me I was like, I don't like, I want more fantastical things.
Yeah, I think where the story kind of gets in the weeds is where there's all these really cool ideas and he's trying to string them in, and they're all referential to our world, so we can be like, oh, like I got you, but at the same time you're like, okay, what does this have to do with like the main?
So I'm wondering if that's like the whole like the humor, right, the wit of it all, because like it does happen in Good Omens as well, where I'm just like, all right, okay, I get this. Is this supposed to be a trope? And I realize, oh, it is a trope for British writers to write like this type of style, where it's kind of like, you know, on the nose, type of like, oh yeah, I know what that is, but they call it like a thingamajig with a wire, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's almost like Douglas Adams in that same vein. Right.
Someone doesn't like Douglas Adams apparently.
I have tried so hard to enjoy that series, and I absolutely hate it.
Yeah, you know what? I'm wondering if just like this kind of absurdist referential humor is just like, it's definitely not my cup of tea.
Yeah, like I'm okay with the book. Like I'm also not a Discworld reader. I found that I could follow the storylines just fine. I understood most of that British humor, but it's kind of, I wasn't wowed by it. I'm just kind of, you know, there's all, like Poon said, there's all these little things, but it never goes far enough that you get invested in it. It's like, here's a little bit here. Here's a little bit here. I'm going to tie this magic string that goes up, down, in, around, and inside out to connect to this. But once I've connected it, I'm done with it. But there's no...
It's basically a setup for the punchline.
Yeah. But the punchline is like, you know, hidden within 2 words and the entire page. And once you gloss over it, you're like, oh, well, that was disappointing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just read this. It was printed first in 1994, so it's 25 years old. So, I mean, obviously this style of writing, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is very common. Like I said, I have not dove into any more Terry Pratchett stuff, but for me, the disjointed feeling was just the fact that there was no chapters. And things just like there were asterisks, right? But then there were places where you're like, oh, okay, they finished, and then like a little space, and then next paragraph was like a completely different person. And then I was like, and now I have to be like, what are we talking about? Oh, okay. And it took me so much time to reset my head. I like chapters so that way I know who I'm listening to.
Yeah, well, and it happens so frequently.
Yes.
That you would start getting into a character finally, and then switch to another character, and you're like, oh, okay.
There was
the piecing together might work if you know the characters, but if you don't know them, it's a struggle to connect to them.
Yeah, there was one where it was literally like 3 sentences or 3 phrases, and then it switched automatically to something else. And I was like, okay, I guess we're only gonna hear three lines from Susan's story, and then we're gonna go somewhere else. I forgot where I put that
But I found some of those blurbs, so I'm like, this chunk doesn't really offer much to the actual storyline. Like, you read the chunk and you're like, okay, they went from one town to the other. They literally could have said they went from this town to this town, instead of having a page and a half of, well, he's sleeping. No, he's not sleeping. Well, he's tired because he's sleeping. It's like, of course he's sleeping. Oh, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So they travel from one town and they're afraid of robbers. Cool.
Yeah. So I guess my that's why I brought up the whole 1994 thing. I'm wondering if that was just the way that kind of storytelling was being told in this type of like way back then. I don't know. I don't remember it. I mean, I haven't read a lot of 1990s books, but
there are 41 books in the Discworld thing.
Ooh.
Sorry. Max got a new wall, so he's very excited.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's 41 books. Like, good God.
Yeah.
Pratchett, you are the science fiction. You're like the Nora Roberts of science fiction. Good for you.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd love that.
Hey,
a really angry letter from Terry Pratchett.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, he might like it. But I mean, yeah, like with the whole Discworld aside, they named their band Music with Rocks in. And when I first read the back, I thought that the whole rocks thing was going to be a big factor in the whole music making.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, and it wasn't. It was just like, oh, there's this troll hitting rocks, right? And it just so happens to be kind of like a drum set, but it had nothing to do with the actual, it wasn't what made it special, right? The music special. It was the guitar that took over everyone, right?
It was totally just a wink to rock and roll.
Yeah.
So that's all it was. It was there for the joke.
Yeah.
But
and
even reading this back, I read this and I don't get the connection even in the back between this beginning part. And it's like, everyone mistakes you for the tooth fairy because you're Death's granddaughter, and then you have to face music. It's called Music with Rocks in it, but there's no connection for so long. I'm like, this doesn't.
Also, okay, here's a question from the description. Now, I thought it was going to be Death having a midlife crisis and joining the band.
Yes.
That's
what I thought too.
That's
what I thought too. That's what I wanted.
I know. I was like, oh, cool. She joins a rock band. Oh, that's not what the story is.
No, but if you look at the cover, right? It's Death riding a motorcycle.
Yeah, I know. This is so misleading.
False. So you're going into it thinking one thing, and you come out of it going, okay.
Yeah.
But not only does Death not join a rock band, he literally runs away from the story for half the book, and you're like, "What is happening?"
Yeah, no,
what is going on, Death?
Yeah.
Why is Death gone? Why is there a rap death happening?
Oh, okay. Speaking about Granddaddy Death, there's that one point where he enlists into the whole was it the foreign region, whatever.
Yes.
And I sat there and I was like, that corporal who kept on forgetting words.
Yeah.
I wanted to strangle him. He was so annoying. It's only 2 sections of the book, but I just wanted to murder him.
The end.
Yeah. Well, okay, because this is book number 16 or whatever, I just assumed that every single person that they met had already appeared somewhere in the series. So it was basically you're just kind of meeting people, and it's name dropping. It's oh, hey, look, there's that person that you read about, and there's that person, and there's that person, and you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest problem, because even with the whole Granddaddy Death, when he enlisted, there was a war going on between 3 factions, right? That we had no idea about. And in this book, one of them attacks another faction. You're like, oh, cool. And then nothing happens.
Yeah. And then he just leaves.
Yeah, he just leaves.
A beggar. And I'm like, I don't understand. I thought you were fighting this war, and now you're with Paulo, Ron, and the duck guy. What? Like, what's
Yeah. So I think like what Karen said was right. It's just like there's so many things that unfortunately, because we're not privy to, because we haven't read the first 15 books, that we actually don't understand. Like, I mean, like he didn't drop a lot of city names, which is kind of nice. Like, there's only like what 4 or 5 different cities in the different regions and stuff. But like the sheer amount of characters, because like I'll read something and I'll be like, should I remember his name? And then I'll read the whole book and be like, oh, I guess I shouldn't have remembered his name at all.
Yeah. I think we're kind of. I think you're right. We're kind of at a disadvantage because unless you've read the other ones, maybe these are new characters. Maybe they're not. I have a feeling that Buddy is new.
Yeah. Okay. So Amanda,
Yeah.
to me, this reminds me of romance books where it's like where you're following the main couple, which is the band, and then you meet the previous couple from the other book, and then you meet the next possible couple, which will be the next book.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of that.
Yeah, but when you read the romance ones, you can read it and then leave it, and then you don't have questions about it.
That's true. I mean, I don't have questions about this. I don't need to.
Yeah.
Know
I mean,
It was well written.
I mean, having said that, I mean, oh, what was that called? Amanda, what was your book's name?
It was called Deep.
Yeah. I have to say,
No, sorry. It was called Play. It was called
Play. Yeah. Okay. I have to say, I mean,
Deep is another one in the series.
I actually enjoyed reading that one more than this. Because like not to carp on this book, like I said, like I don't think it's a bad book. It just wasn't written for me. It's just I could follow the characters very well, very easily, right? Yeah. And the second that book ended, I knew that like everything had been tied up. Whereas here, there's still a lot of loose ends that will be tied up later on. But I came in right in the middle, almost literally right in the middle, and I have no intention of continuing.
Yeah, we're going backwards.
Like, because I mean, like, we talk about Bel Canto as well, but at least Bel Canto was just one book in itself. It started and it ended, and that was it. There was no cliffhangers. There wasn't any need for you to reinvest in something more than this, right? So, like I said, it's unfortunate. I should have done a little bit more research when it came to looking at these books. I was actually really hoping that, like, at least the musical aspect of this book was a one-time only thing. It was just everything else around it where it got really confusing.
Yeah. So I think it would go well with our brand if we discuss the music aspect of the book.
Yeah.
And comment on that because I feel like we've sort of vented everything else.
Yeah. So I actually literally wrote down some notes for this. I have one quote that hit me hard. Okay. So yeah, so like on page 180, they're just starting the band and they got paid for their first gig, and like Buddy was just like he wants to be famous, and Glaude's just like, no, I don't want to be famous, and like Cliff is like isn't that what every artist wants? And Claude goes, in my experience, what every true artist really wants is to be paid. I was like, and I just folded up the book and I was like, I need to go for a walk. That just hit me right here. I feel you, man. I feel you right here. And I was like, man, I mean, this was promising. When I read that quote, I was like, okay, this is gonna be promising. We're gonna talk about some real musician shit. And then no. But that was my quote. I love that quote. That quote like hit me home like really hard. Do you guys have any like special quotes at all that you liked?
I think I had 2.
One. I actually have 2, and they're quite close together.
Okay. Why don't you guys share?
Okay, Amanda, you go first.
Okay. Mine was on page 153. I don't know if you had this one, Karen. And I think this was one of the ones where I think it was 153. Was it? I don't know. That's what I wrote down. And it said that music can sometimes prolong the life of those intimately associated with it. And the first immediate thought that I thought of was those people with dementia who remember absolutely nothing. And then play them something and they're like, I remember listening to this song with my sweetheart and this and this and this. Like they remember nothing, but they remember that.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of like music therapy and that it is something that's healing, and that's why, you know, we're all in it, and it's the experience, right? So that was like kind of the one big one that I'm like, oh my God, that was my promising quote. And then I'm like, well, I can see how that kind of actually stayed in the book with Buddy and all that kind of stuff, but
Oh yeah, because Buddy cheated death because he got
was the guy. So I can see that, because that was when Susan went back to death and she's like, this doesn't make sense. His thing has run out. Why is all this blue stuff in it? Like, I don't understand. And yeah. And then the other one was very close after that, where it was on 158, where it said, some religions say the universe started with music. Those are my two.
Lovely.
Yeah, I was like, and then after that, I was just skim reading. Chunks at a time.
It's okay. Yeah, no, my first quote was the same one as yours.
Oh, okay, nice.
And then subsequently, I don't have the right quote, and I just wrote down sort of the gist of it, but it was the idea that music saves people from death.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing. It prolongs life. So we've heard time and time again stories of people that would be like, I don't know what would have happened to me if I hadn't found music, or I don't know where I'd be without my music. You know, just it's something that people are drawn to, and literally Buddy saved from death because
of his stuff, yeah.
Of the music, right? It's a lovely sentiment and it's a lovely musing. I just don't think it like hit.
It just, I think I understand why he would write a line like that. It's that whole thing, like he just didn't delve deep enough. It's like you said, it's, yeah, Buddy prolonged life. Okay, what now? What now? What now? What now?
Yeah. I think maybe that was the trick too, was that, I don't know about you, but it just felt like we meandered a bit. Like we didn't, there wasn't a feeling of we're going towards something. Because as soon as they formed the band, we were like, okay, now what?
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're going to go on tour? Okay, cool. Bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And by the time that they went over the cliff, you're like, freaking finally, something happened.
No, but I think that's the big problem, right? The big problem was the band itself, right, was essentially a minor storyline, right? Because essentially once you got to the part where they got Dibbler, their presenter, right? By the time they got to that point, right, it was just like, okay, well, they're just gonna go tour, and we know that, like, even the members of the band know that this guitar was going to like essentially kill Buddy, because he wasn't like, he was spacing out, he was like losing his personality, he's not talking as much, and like you know, he's not really eating, or he's not really present, right? So they knew that like something was happening, like the music was taking over his life. But then we spent so much time on like how the Wizards were going to deal with this, because there was a problem. How Susan was getting in the way of this person dying, and her kind of like learning like that sometimes like these things, like there's a heavy consequence for like kind of like meddling with stuff, right? So I think.
Sorry, I remember what happened to the librarian. He played that show with him, and then
left, and he just left.
He played like 2 shows, and I'm like, wait a minute, have there only ever been 3 members of this band?
Yeah. So what happened was with that one, there Glaude was like, oh, get me a piano. I know a really good piano player. And then he like just goes to like the archives and be like, hey, librarian, we need you to play. And I was like, oh, I thought this orangutan was going to be able to speak. Nope.
Yeah, I was so confused. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then the first gig they did, which was it was it was the one not at the Cavern, but like the first tavern, the second time they played it. The orangutan was there, and then like the piano was smoking, and then it just like exploded, and I was like, and then the orangutan just kept on playing, and I was like, what's going on here? And I was like, that's so cool. And then he just pieces.
Yeah. And then the next time you see him, he's building a freaking carriage for death, and you're like, what is happening?
Yeah. So I don't know, but in terms of that whole the storyline of the band, I mean, I guess that's like kind of what like in terms of like being on the nose and being like, this is a rock band, right? It fit into that storyline because it was like, oh, this is a rock band. They form under weird circumstances. Like they just randomly meet. And other than the fact that they go to this like shop and like find this magical instrument, they go on tour, they get famous, and then they start realizing the toll it's taking on them and what's happening and whether it's actually worth it or not, right? Because at that, like, there's one where they get to that big concert, they finish, and then the crowd's like asking for an encore and they just peace, right?
Gorge.
Yeah, but like I think in terms of that, it was just like, okay, if you just cut everything out and just follow the band itself, the storyline made sense. It was just not as fulfilling, I guess. But it makes sense. You're like, oh, you go from this band, and then they're really super popular, and they're super popular, getting a bigger and bigger and bigger crowds. And at one point, they realize this is not worth it anymore.
I guess in a lot of ways it is almost like a commentary on how groups actually do make it, right?
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
you get discovered as an artist or a group, and immediately you start performing. You perform and you spend that first like forever building up your name, building up your rep, building up the ability to make that kind of money, and then eventually you burn out, which is pretty valid when you see some of the stars out there who are like, kid stars, and then by the time they hit 21, they're all addicted to something or another, or they're dead.
Yeah. And like going back to the whole like when it was written, like a lot of people, let's say if you're watching this and you're just moving into college, the music industry is very different now. So nowadays, if you're like signed to a label or you have someone that's an agent, they're carefully watching what you do. They're carefully watching your nutrition, your health, and like what type of people you're allowed to see, especially if you're an asset, because unfortunately they can't have you just piecing out, right? But back in like like the grunge era, like especially when like our parents were listening to music, it was not uncommon for people to overdose. It was not uncommon for them to suddenly just die the next day in like a horrible like drunk driving car crash. Like those things happened all the time. And like I said, we don't really see it as much now. I mean, I think right now it's about anxiety, right? Right now it's about anxiety and depression and mental health and self-help, help and stuff. But like I said, it just the agencies that surround like Sony Records and stuff.
Yeah.
They really protect you from those things now because they cannot have you just die, right?
Nope, because then they start losing money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's just like Dibbler, right? Like when he started charging for hot dogs, I think it was, or something like that, and all the other stuff. I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. So as like the manager who always wants money, and immediately, I know this sounds weird, immediately I thought of the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah. Oh, like that. Like there's that documentary out right now, right?
Yeah. Well, it's been out for a while. I have.
Yeah. Was it called the Boy Band Con or something?
No. Their documentary was called "Show Me What You're Made Of." That was out a few years ago. But they talked about how when they started, it was just nonstop. Like they were discovered, they were put together, they had to go to show, they had to go to show, they had to go to show. They were selling merchandise. They started out in like school gyms, and then eventually they. But there was a long time where they didn't see the money because their manager had taken that money, and there was like a long legal battle, and eventually they got some of it. Like these tours were making millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they're like, we were still living home with our parents.
Yeah, like I just watched a recent documentary. Actually, it was a YouTube video, and they were interviewing an ex K-pop star, and she was from the group Crayon Pop, and they were like relatively large for 5 years, and how for them as well they call them idols in Korea, and for her, she joined the group owing the industry money because all the money that they were putting into like their dance routines and the room and board, they had to pay it all back. So there were gigs where, like, for example, Crayon Pop actually was invited by Lady Gaga to perform. They didn't see a single penny of that performance.
Yeah.
right? And they were just saying how like, yeah, there were days where like you were literally like the van would come get you at 4 a.m. and you wouldn't get back home until 1 a.m. So you would have 3 hours of sleep. And no one is rich in this industry because you owe so much money and stuff. So
and unless you have the lasting power to actually make that money, like you don't, you end up going in debt.
Yeah. And like also with like Glod, I think I think out of the 3 characters, I actually enjoyed him the most. I felt like he had the most personality out of the 3. The
was
dwarf.
that the troll or the dwarf?
He was a dwarf. Yeah. Because like because he was a really terrible negotiator.
Yeah.
And I think that like a lot of like, I mean, I know for myself at least, I'm not really good at selling myself and making sure that I get a good cut whenever I do concerts and stuff. So I felt for him because he had the best of intentions. He did what he wanted to make money, and he wanted to make sure that he was like, you know, watching out for the group, but he just didn't have those negotiation skills, right? And for me, I was like, I feel you, because I never had those either. And I just didn't know how to, like, I didn't know how to fight for something, but understand how far I was allowed to go before it was just a little bit too ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I know that it was just like a joke, because he was just like, oh yeah, like I like totally negotiated with them, and yeah, we came back. We're like, yeah, it's $5. He's like, but isn't that what they wanted to give us originally? He's like, oh yeah, but at one point it dropped down to like 2.
Yeah.
And like, and the thing was like, he was the one that would drop it down to 2, right? So I definitely felt that. It's just like, on the one hand, you have this like, you know, you have like the dibblers of the world where they just want to make money off of you. And then on the other hand, you do have these musicians who do mean well, but they just don't understand business savvy. They don't understand finances, right? So they like when you watch like the whole Backstreet Boys like thing, you're like, oh, like they should have known better, but they didn't know better, right? Because they didn't have that information. And it was the same thing with these guys. Like, so you had like Glod, who just wanted to make money, right? And Cliff was just kind of there. And then you had Buddy, who I guess was just like, he was supposed to be like the true musician, because he's like, I just want to do this for free, because music should be free and no one should have to pay for it. You know, it's art. So yeah. I was like, okay, so like at least that there was some semblance of trying to create stereotypes when it comes to like musicians, right? So like Buddy,
or at least the perspective on what music should be doing.
Yeah. Because like at one point we know that like it wasn't Buddy who was speaking anymore, right? It was the guitar, right? Or the entity that was in the guitar. But essentially that guitar just wanted to create music and wanted just to make music, and it didn't care if there was money being made or whatever. It just wanted to make music. And I was like, that's nice and pure. At least there was like that there, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. I just found it. I can't even say that was that interesting of a book, but I still couldn't like stop reading, because I'm like, I just want to know what happens. But it takes so long to know what happens.
I think for me, one of the reasons why I was like, oh, let's just keep on reading, was because sometimes the sections where, like, for example, let's talk about Susan, right? There are some sections where like you get pages and pages of Susan. Yeah. And then you get a paragraph and then 2 sentences. And it's like, no, I'm going to keep on reading to get back to Susan.
Yeah. And then she disappears. And you're like, oh, there she is. What has she been doing this entire time? Yeah, I don't know. I like that there were parts. It kind of brought a little bit to like that nitty gritty bit of this is what happens when you start a band and when you start this kind of industry and stuff like this. But at the same time, you're kind of like, oh, Jesus, I want to talk to the crow more than I want to learn about the band. I like the crow. The crow was cool.
Yeah. I think, I think personally for myself, there was a lot of cool things that I got out of it in terms of like how it related to like some of my experiences as a musician. I also understand that like I am diving into this way too deep. It is just like, it's fantasy and it's supposed to be a fun, quick read, and all of it is just like quick, like dry humor that's supposed to be super funny. So I totally understand. And like at one point I was like, I was trying to get more out of it, and I was like, well, maybe that this book wasn't written that way. It wasn't meant to. Hello, Philip.
Hi, Phil. You know what? I actually want to know about Mort. Because you know that beginning blurb when they're like Mort and Yazbel or whatever.
Yeah.
And how he like completely failed as his apprentice. I'm like, that's interesting. But
I almost want to go back to read book 1 of the series.
or I want to learn about Albert because I'm like, how do you?
Oh, yeah.
Albert, it would be really cool because
how is it that you were plucked out of reality to go work for death?
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? Although I'm pretty sure he's dead, isn't he? Like he only had
dun dun dun. We don't know.
Literally, you have like 15 seconds left. I'm like, what happened to Albert? What is he dead? Is he alive? What's happening?
Honestly, I think for this series, I would not mind maybe listening to it on an audiobook.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would want to read like the first 15, but I wouldn't mind having like headphones and just listening to it.
Yeah.
I was actually having issues finishing the rest of this book, so I looked up the audiobook. It would have taken too long. So if my reading is quicker than the narrator, but the narrator, I can't remember the name of the narrator, but it's like a British voice, very soothing. And I was like, oh, I could listen to you. Like but I just don't know if I would want to read it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think I did the last 60 pages like last night.
You slammed it. Yeah, that's what I did too. I did the last 180 pages yesterday.
Oh, okay. I was only at 60. I tried to time.
No, I read it for a little bit, put it away, and I was like, oh no, we're meeting tomorrow. So there you go. Yeah. But I don't know, like like I said, I don't know. There wasn't any technique involved in terms of like music making. There was no like talking about like how the band or stuff. Like at one point, I think it was just like the whole like Deus Ex Machina. It's like these three people have no idea how to make music. All of a sudden, there's this like soul possessing guitar that makes them play everything really, really well. I was like, oh, isn't that fancy? Isn't that great? So I think that, like in that sense, it was just like there was no like, this is how you do this. This is how you work together. This is how you do stuff. It's just like, no, like he just drops like this magical entity that just helps all three of the members create beautiful music. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine.
And I think in some ways, like a lot of these tiny little detail things are things that we all relate to. Like we all know about, or we can all relate to that band that has the one member that's super talented and the other two are just kind of like,
yeah, what are their names?
Oh yeah, like it's like the Jonas Brothers. You're like, I know Joe. Oh no, it's like no, One Direction. One Direction. I know.
We all, or in sync. Like you have like the one head frontliner that is always going to be successful no matter what, and then the other ones are just kind of like floating around the side.
Where did I hear there was some sort of a joke that was like, what's my favorite game? Name any member of Maroon 5 besides Adam Levine.
Actually, or 98 Degrees.
Yeah.
I can't. Sorry. But
Child of the 90s.
Pardon?
Child of the 90s.
Very much so. I am proud of my 90s pop. I have a playlist on YouTube that is just 90s pop music and R&B. I love that crap, man. But it's, everybody relates to that. Everybody relates to the group that tries to emulate the group that is.
Yes. Totally, yeah.
So in that kind of sense, I can see how this is relatable in some ways. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's kind of like, it is that super dry. It's like, well, other than outright saying it, this is pretty obvious and it's not, like, it's not even like cleverly hidden. It's just kind of like Dibbler actually literally says, if you want to be music with rocks in it, then you have to do this. It's like, oh yeah, okay. So this is like NSYNC and this is somebody else and whatever.
Yeah. I think it's like compared to the 17 books we've read already, like, this one here probably has like, in terms of the way that I've been kind of analyzing the other books, this one here doesn't have the same level of in-depth kind of like discussion when it comes to music.
Yeah.
Because this one I think was just like, it was a story, like it was driving the story further. Yeah. But I don't think like compared to like, let's say like Nocturnes or like Do Not Say We Have Nothing, like those ones were centered fully around music. And because of that, like, and like these musicians that we were like reading in other books, some of them were professional musicians. Right? Yeah. So a lot of the stuff like we were like, oh, we didn't have to talk about a lot of these things. And then with like, let's say like Bel Canto and the Chimes, they were trying something new. Right? Yeah. And they were trying really hard to immerse that world into music. So like with the Chimes, it was like, crescendo, like running really quickly, right? And that stuff. And that was interesting, right? But I think, like I said, for this one here, it just isn't on the same level when it comes to the in-depthness of it. I don't mind it. It's just that when I was choosing this, I was hoping that it would be there, and it wasn't as kind of like it wasn't as in-depth as I wanted it. That's all.
I think it's also when we're talking about how nothing really connects really well, like it does seem like there's a bunch of different storylines. It's like, okay, there's Susan and Death. Okay, there's the stuff that's happening at the university. Okay, there's the band, and then isn't there another one? There's like 3 or 4 of them. And you can kind of sum it all up in 1 or 2 sentences. Like, Death is unsatisfied, runs away, comes back later. Band finds magical guitar, all of a sudden is amazing, and then dies. And then university people don't like music. That's like, and
he doesn't like music that sort of brings an uproar.
Yeah.
It's railing against, what is art, right? It's a little old, right? We've already this. But I mean, this was 1994, so
yeah, I keep like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like you think about the people that were like, oh, 60s music is all about drugs, and 70s music is all like
disco.
About drugs.
It's all about drugs. No, so yeah.
Yeah, right.
So I think all of the people in university were like the old crowd. You're just like, young whippersnappers doing all this stuff. It's bad for you, right? So I get that. But then I also like the fact that it's just like, yeah, there's this group of old men who are just like, this is bad, but they also secretly love it.
Yeah, because he sewed himself that leather big jacket, and he's like, look what I have.
Yeah. What was it like? Was it Born to Ruin?
Oh yeah.
That was so good. It was a sparkly silver outfit, Born to Ruin. I thought that was like, yeah, so good.
I think this is the only book where I'm kind of like you said, I don't really know how to feel about it. Like, there are certain parts I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And some parts I'm like, oh. It does. And in some ways, because he's left so many hanging things, I do sit there and I'm like, should I read book 17 and see if I can freaking figure out where the hell the end of some of these endings are or not? So it is planned. Like, I'm sure Terry Pratchett's going to continue on with this series. Like, there's 41. I can't imagine him just randomly stopping at 41.
No, Terry Pratchett passed away a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Brian Sanderson's taken over?
No, that was Robert Jordan.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
so it was one of those big like fantasy like author names. There's like
Sanderson took over for Robert Jordan.
That is clearly how much I read Terry Pratchett to know that.
No, it's okay. I didn't even know this either. So like this is news to me.
That's okay. I'm sort of like in the fantasy world of people talking about the book, so like I know it. But
it literally says in here he died in March 2015. I'm sorry. It says it in the book. But like, there's 41. Like if somebody's taking over for him and he's continuing, I'd be interested to see if the new person, if there is somebody that's taken over, do they use the same brand of like that super dry British humor? Will they put their new twist on it? Is it going to be a completely new, different Discworld? Like,
And I think if there was anybody that would take over, I don't think there is anybody interested, but if there was anybody, it would probably be Neil Gaiman because he worked so closely with him.
Yeah, but Neil Gaiman, I find, is not as dry.
Neil Gaiman is like
as
and dark.
He's very dark. Like if you've ever read The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, that is dark, and that is a kid's book, and I have that in my library, and I have this kid who's like, this is great because it's about like ghosts and like scary things coming at you and living in a graveyard and stuff. And I'm like, shit, you're in grade 4. Your mom's gonna kick my ass.
Yeah,
but
okay, being scared, right? They love being fearful.
I know but he also has, if you've never read it, Fortunately the Milk by Neil Gaiman is also hilarious. It's super short and cute. But I find that Neil Gaiman is more approachable in his writing, even though there is that dry British humor in it.
Well, and like I said, in the end, like it might just be the style of writing, right? Because
Yeah,
it's not like I hate all British authors. It's just that I'm not a big fan of like pages and pages of banter that doesn't add to the story.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if one of us had been fully immersed in the
Yeah.
Kind of have that comparison and a little bit of balance.
Because at least that way, one of us can like navigate the waters for the other two.
Yeah.
We're all going into this one kind of blind, so
yeah.
Well, we try it.
Yeah.
We tried. That's what this club is about, is trying, because we tried really hard with the loser too.
Oh, but okay, but the loser was but that was translated, right? So also, like I said, like there, the funny thing is that one video that we did had the most engagement because so many German speakers were like, "Oh my god, Canadians read like it was a Thomas Bernhardt, right?
Yeah.
Right, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's so cool that you guys are reading it! Like that's so amazing." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of nice, like in the sense that like." They've only ever read it in like the whole German. They didn't even know it was translated, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So there's that too. But like I picked that one too, and I'm not defending that one either. So speaking about pick, I think we're done talking about this book.
I think so.
Yeah. So I mean, it was fun, and you're right. I would love to read more on the whole like I love the hereditary aspect of death. And how like it skipped a generation, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of cool because that's how it works, right? And I like how it was essentially Susan's story of her growing up and realizing certain things, that there are things that she can change because you need new blood and you need a new generation. And then there are things where you should just leave unbroken. You should let it continue on, right? And it was just like learning about the consequences and also like the responsibility of her actions, right? Like she is technically what do I call it? Immortal, right? Like whatever she does, like she can't really screw up anything. Like in this world, like the universe will just right itself, but there are consequences to what she does, right?
Yeah.
So I thought at least like that throughway, that storyline was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah. All right. So I think it's Amanda's choice, right? We have 2 books that you mentioned.
I have 2 because I picked them up at Powell's because I had problems and I spent a lot of money there. Okay, so these 2 I kind of stumbled upon. So one of them is called Beautiful Music by Michael something I can't pronounce. Zadurian.
The cover is beautiful.
Right? And it says, set in early 1970s Detroit, a divided city still reeling from its violent race riot of 1967, Beautiful Music is a story of one man's transformation through music. Danny, I believe it's pronounced Zemsky, is a husky, pop, radio-loving loner balancing a dysfunctional home life with the sudden harsh realities of freshman year at high school marked by racial turbulence. But after tragedy strikes the family, Danny's mother becomes increasingly erratic and angry about the seismic cultural shifts unfolding in her city and the world. As she tries to hold this together with the help of Librium, highballs, and breakfast cereal, Danny finds his own reason to carry on, rock and roll. In particular, drums like MC5, Iggy Pop, in the vein of it's about the power of music and the ability to save one's soul. So that's one. Sorry, my laptop. I'm sorry if I'm like sucking. I had a crown put in yesterday. So I'm like, it's.
Oh no, don't worry about it.
Didn't even notice.
Yeah, didn't even notice.
You will now. Okay, and the second one is very different. It's called Violin by Anne Rice, which is very different.
Salacious.
In the grand manner of Interview with a Vampire, Anne Rice's new novel moves across time and continents from 19th century Vienna to St. Charles, Greek revival, and present-day New Orleans, the dazzling capitals, blah, blah, blah. Story of 2 charismatic figures bound to each other by passionate commitment to music as a means of rapture, seduction, and liberation. Novel centers Triana, who once dreamed of becoming a great musician, and the demonic fiddler Stefan, tormented ghost of a Russian aristocrat who begins to prey upon her using his magic violin, first to enchant, then to dominate and draw her into a state of madness through the music she loves. So she sets out to resist him and fight not only for her sanity, but for her life. And the struggle draws them both to a terrifying supernatural realm where they find themselves surrounded by memories, horrors, and overwhelming truths. So two very different books.
I don't know. I feel more compelled with Violin.
I also feel more compelled with Violin.
I feel like this is very Mozart Blood-esque.
Yeah, like that. But like,
yeah, I'm getting more Mozart Blood from that, and I'm getting more of the
Why Music Was Free.
This is like light.
I
want to say this is like light. The life we cannot. The one that you picked, Poon. The life.
Do not say we have nothing.
Yeah, dude. This is like I feel like a light version of that. Because it's all about like race riots and all that kind of stuff. And,
well, I mean, that's not light. But
lighter. It's not about revolution. It's just about racism.
Yeah, so this is about 320, and this is really? This is under 300.
Oh.
Ooh.
So the copy that I have is 280 something. Oh, because the pages are super thick. That's why.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, like I said, I feel more compelled towards Violin myself.
Let's do Violin by Anne Rice.
By Anne Rice? Okay.
Yeah.
So let me write that in. Okay.
Very rapturous cover.
Awesome.
And there she is, hanging out behind some, I don't know what, fence.
Is she wearing feathers? Like a boa?
I think it's either a boa or a very fluffy jacket. But it's a big boa if it's a boa.
This will be my first book that I've read from her, I think. Because I mean, like I've never dove into any of her stuff, so this will be nice because it's like nice and short, right? So then I'll be like, oh, this is kind of cool.
1997.
Oh, okay.
Look at that. We're sticking
her new book.
Taking the 90s.
This one's 97. This one is, I want to say this is like 2000 something.
I want to say 2013. Oh my gosh.
18. This is brand new.
Wow. Okay. You know what, Amanda? You can always hold on to that and pick it next time.
I could. I've got a few actually. You know that book called Beautiful Music for Ugly Children?
Yes, I have that too.
I bought myself a copy. I was gonna read that.
Okay, I have that one too. I was just gonna say, I mean, like this can be a discussion for like offline as well, but like our book club has always been like more fiction focused.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you guys would be willing to just open it up to just like any book that has kind of like a music kind of like, because like I think we've done some that have been
we did 2 nonfiction.
Nonfiction, yeah, we did. Right. Well, How Music Became Free was one that like because I was just talking about the whole CD ripping and everything, right?
And yes.
And Amanda, you picked one, didn't you?
Did I? Oh,
was it The Piano Shop on the?
The piano. Yeah, the piano shop. It was accidentally a nonfiction.
Yeah, but I think in those ones there's still like a storyline that's happening. Right? It's people's stories and people's kind of like the history of what happened. So I think like as long as it's not like an essay on like the importance of polytonality.
I think the hard thing about nonfiction, especially when it comes to music, is that it's not an essay. Because I found a lot of nonfiction stuff, but it is like, let me talk to you about the history of the human mouth and how it began. You're like, oh god.
Well, it's like how I wanted to pick, was it The World in 6 Songs? But I mean, that one's a little bit thick, and then I was like, okay, this is interesting, but it feels more like I'm like in school learning again.
Yeah.
No, I've got a couple nonfictions on my list that are kind of like memoirs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think those are fine because like I mean, like I said, like the 2 that both of you guys picked were super fun to read because we followed someone's life. We followed like, and then what happened? So like for me, it was just like, oh, like I mean, I get this is real, but I'm still following a character and then also learning about music at the same time.
Yeah, there's a couple that I've sort of put, I've got like an ongoing list of things that are possible music ones. I did a whole bunch of, I went through biographies of composers, but like, you know, Western dead, white, classical composers. And then I found another one that was like the history of O Canada. and it was like,
that would be fun.
That would be interesting.
That would be really
yeah,
interesting.
really short or something. So like, there's stuff out there. We just
You have to dig a little bit
Mhm.
because it's one of those. It's kind of like it's a niche market for us to look at stuff.
Well, that being said, in looking through things, I found one book that I ended up just reading on my own because I was like, I can't wait. I have to read it myself. And it's called In the Evening in the Palace of Reason. And it's back and forth biography looking at the life of Bach and Frederick the Great and how they sort of like intertwined and their histories and Germany at the time. So like if you're looking for a really good nonfiction, I recommend that one because it read really easily. I mean, there was like 2 or 3 sections where I was like, okay, we don't even need this. But like most of it, I was fascinated by.
Yeah, because like the reason why like I brought this up was because like we had just recently read Ecstasy, and for me like I know that it was like they're like, oh, this is like well researched, but it's fictionish because it's not all true, but it was true enough that like these things could have happened. So for me, I was like, this is so cool. Like that's why I would be totally open to more something like that because those would be really fun.
I could have sworn Mary Stuart has a book on like what's her name von.
Oh, Hildegard von Bingen. Yeah, I started
Hildegard.
it, and it was very good.
Yeah.
Doesn't she have one on her?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hildegard. Yeah.
Yeah, Hildegard. Which I was like, shit, we should read that. And the thing is, like, I'm buying all these ones that are like music related. And I'm like, and I'm just shelving them. Like, I have this little like pile where I'm like, I should bring this to Musetta Stone, but I have like 6 months until I get to choose again.
Yeah, I think one that I had my eyes on was Sounds and Sweet Airs, The Forgotten Women of Classical Music. So like, just, things in that sort of vein, that's like, stuff out there. I don't know if you want me to share with you sort of my compiled list of things that I've sort of tagged. Because I've also got modern things that my next pick I have already picked, and it sounds absurd. So we shall see.
Wait. It's called Absurd?
No. It sounds absurd. It's called
okay.
I mean, like, I don't know if you want me to tell you now.
No, we can do it next time. Yeah, do it next time. Okay, so we're going to do Violin by Anne Rice next time. I believe it's probably going to be in September when we decide to do this. Yeah, because it's summer.
Short read anyway.
Yeah,
so.
And we need a break because summer, you know, because summer. And then maybe we'll see if Amanda makes it to the island. Maybe all 3 of us can hang out.
I would like to come over.
Fried chicken, Amanda. You missed out last time when Karen and I hung out at my place and had fried chicken, and you didn't come.
Oh, you know what? I want to shut up. Maybe if I can get away, maybe. Oh no, I can't next weekend because I'm going to the Backstreet Boy concert next weekend.
Ooh, nice. I'm actually going to be on the mainland next weekend as well. I have a CrossFit competition.
I'm so excited. When are you coming over?
Next weekend for a CrossFit competition. So I won't be able to hang out because I'm going to be competing Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So
okay. Maybe
we'll figure something out. Like, I mean, I have Friday, Saturday, Sundays off now for the summer.
I'm just saying, I can pop over this weekend for a day or 2.
Oh, okay. We'll figure it out. We'll talk offline.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on talking about Terry Pratchett's soul music. Join us next time, September. We'll figure out a date and I'll write it down. I'll post it. But we'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.